Hi, I'm Yasmin Owusu, and this is my producer, Charlie Kesenek.
But I'm your husband, and you're using all my stuff right now. What are you talking about?
So anyway, I've been looking for a one-stop shop podcast for wellness, amateur sociology, psychology, pop culture, and whatever else sparks my interest. So I created one. We are limited to no lanes. We hit the gas and get into it. This is Peaked. Press play.
Hi, welcome to Peak Podcast. I'm Yasmin, your host, and we're back for another week of Peaked. And I don't know about y'all, but I am under the weather, sick, absolutely riddled with FIFA fever. I know I talked about it a little bit last week, the phenomenon of my FIFA fever, and it has only intensified. I have, a 1,000-degree fever of FIFA. I have my multiple affiliations that I'm getting into with certain nations, right? Like I have my U.S. affiliation, being a U.S. citizen. My mom's Armenian American, but Armenia is not qualifying for the World Cup on the reg. But who knows? I mean, this year we had Curacao, we had Capo Verde. I mean, we had countries we did not expect to see. So, Lord, in 4 years, maybe Armenia will be in the World Cup. But as of now, we had the U.S. and they recently played Ecuador and lost. And, I can get on board with conceding that win to Ecuador for my U.S. side. And because there's not as rich of a history of soccer or football with a U in the U.S. as there is in like Central and South America. And being like a half African, I understand how steeped in culture that this game can be to people. And it's just not that way here, like it recently, I think it's been ramping up the last couple of World Cups, we've kind of rallied around it more. And like our team is actually really good and has had good standing overall. But, historically soccer has kind of been a game that like young girls play and, their mom brings a casserole to school or whatever. And like, it's only just recently starting to be like more of a thing. So I'm happy for a nation like Ecuador that has been OG soccer, football, to win this. So that's fine for that side. Then I have my, Ghana side, and we recently played our former colonizer, England. And, I've said this before, but my dad being Ghanaian, he moved to the US to go to school, but his sisters, so like a lot of his side of the family moved to England, and they're British nationals, right? So they had that interesting dilemma, but they all kind of rallied behind Ghana as we do. Go Black Stars. And we got a tie, which was a good result. It might have been a strategic decision to just play a little more conservatively, maybe. I think it's always a good idea to have good defense, but it did seem like we erred on the side of being like really strong defensively. But, we had a couple of decent chances at goal, a couple of weird calls. Like there was definitely a chance that we had that was like a breakout where, a defender kind of tackled in an illegal way when we were fully onside. Directly after that, our player was offside. But when he was having that chance at goal, he was onside and it wasn't called. That could have been a penalty, so that could have been a goal. So that was a little iffy. But having 4 points going into it, I won't get into the granular nature of the point system, but essentially you want to kind of be decently high up in your group to get a 0-0 result. Like if it was that we had like 1 point going in, we might have wanted to make sure we got more goals and we might have played more aggressively. But having 4 points going in, being second ranked in our group, maybe we played a little more conservatively, and that would have been smart, especially against as strong of a team as England. And that was all well and good and I wasn't even going to mention the bad calls and all that, and I was going to be a really good sport until a certain underbite, crumpet-eating, limey, anyway. This player, Harry Kane, for the England team, decided to come out of his face to say certain nations, the way that he said that, by the way, I'll come back to, certain nations, are going to want this 0-0, meaning 0-0. That's like Britishism for 0-0 result. And we handled that well. First of all, what do you mean by these nations? Some of these nations? So wouldn't it be a normal thing to say sometimes teams or in these situations, certain players, what is these nations? It's like patronizing, especially coming from like a colonizing like I don't know. I did not like that wording whatsoever. It sounded like some of these little like, jungle nations. Anyway, he didn't say that. I'm definitely adding my own spice to it, but that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing is like some of these little bush nations that run around climbing trees, they want nil results because that's all they can really expect. Excuse me, sir. I didn't want to get into the freaking muck, but I'll do it. Like, you go to hell, I'll go like, subterranean, come back up in Australia. If you want to not have 0-0 on the board, go ahead and score. If you don't want it to be 0-0, score 1. Score 1. You didn't. You couldn't. You had multiple free kicks to try, by the way. You had multiple calls that worked out your way. We had the bad calls. You had calls that I don't even know what the whistle was for. And there you were. You specifically were the striker on several of these free kicks and missed and missed and missed and missed. And I've said that like 5 times, but I think it was 6. And missed, right? So you're complaining about a no-score game. You had ample opportunity to score on. You look really stupid doing that. But congratulations to you on your tie. Anyway, I will leave that there and move on to my more nebulous affiliation, which I am actually watching World Cup games on Telemundo because I have Peacock. I don't have like network TV. I'm not a boomer. I'm an elder millennial, excuse me. So I'm watching it in Spanish, and the Mexican and, the Latino presenters have been very supportive of Ghana in it, saying that they like their vibes and they like our energy. And I agree. I feel the same way about the Mexican team. I think they play with a lot of style. I think they're exciting to watch. They won 3-0 against Czechia, which I am just now learning we are calling Czechia. I was calling it the Czech Republic. And I think that maybe we were always supposed to call it Czechia. At one point we were Czechoslovakia, and then it was Czech Republic, and now it's Czechia. Know better, do better. But I did not get the memo until this World Cup. I'm also learning what Curacao is and where Capo Verde is. And yes, it is in fact in Africa. So anyway, I'm learning a lot this World Cup. It's very, very cosmopolitan. Anyway, so having, worked with a lot of people from Mexico, having traveled in Mexico a bunch, living in Austin. So a lot of my East Austin. So a lot of my neighbors are Mexicans. I am very, very rah-rah team Mexico. Love Mexican people, love Mexican culture, love Mexican food, Mexican shit all day. So if Ghana goes down, Mexico's next. I'm sorry, the US. I'm also trying to kiss the ass of my potential escape route if things really get crazy here. If the wall is built, I want to be on that side of it. So partially this is my plea to be let me in. I'll rip my passport up. Anyway, I was very, very proud of Mexico getting that 3-0 result. It was a really fun game to watch. My FIFA Fever will continue. I'm recording this on Friday, and the next Ghana game is going to be tomorrow against Croatia, I want to say. So we'll see how that goes. If I never mention this again, you'll know we lost. Or if you just see me extremely decked out in Mexican flags, you'll know that Ghana lost, and I will never admit it. But yeah, that's where that is. So anyway, I do have a main topic I want to talk about, but as I'm setting up my cameras, getting ready to do everything, it comes across my desk that, Tom Sandoval of Vanderpump Rules fame is back in the news after disappearing into obscurity of secondary cities like Buda, Texas, to do jumped up karaoke and play a horn horribly and just generally look like you have typhoid fever and you're sweaty. So he has emerged from that to put a restraining order against his girlfriend, or his girlfriend until recently, I'm guessing, Victoria Lee Robinson, I think. And, we believe the victims. I'm saying this almost as a mantra because I'm going to be honest with you. When I heard this news, my brain went to, well, what did he do? So he basically has accused her of having a pattern of abuse against him, both verbal, calling him a loser. Anyway, and, changing passwords on his phone, messing with his social media, and, he showed some bruises on his neck. And I definitely do not believe that you should be violent with anybody, domestically or otherwise. So she should not be hitting him regardless of what may be occurring. But my brain did go to what might have been occurring. And, when you do watch somebody on a TV show for several years and you see how they operate and you see they're a serial cheater, liar, gaslighter, and I have observed him have those patterns of behavior, while I will not question the veracity of him being hurt or talked to poorly, I do wonder if the other party might have received some poor treatment as well. Additionally, okay, that's a really diplomatic way to say it. I wonder what also maybe she has experienced. Let's say that. And in close and quick, tight sequence, I found what maybe she had experienced in the form of some ring camera footage of him pushing her father into a lit fire pit. So this footage, I'm laughing at her nervousness. This footage is basically shown of him approaching Victoria Lee Robinson. I mean, it sounds like she's like a country singer or something like that. And her father are sitting by a fire pit, and he comes over and he seems to be yelling at them about something. And I think we found out now that it's that she was recording him. And, he had said in his complaint to the police that she was recording, trying to be painting herself as the victim. Begs the question, though, if someone records you and you're not doing anything wrong, how would she look like a victim? Interesting. I mean, I think if I'm in that kind of situation, I'm happy for anything to be recorded because I know I'm doing nothing wrong, yes? But if you're throwing people in fire pits, on the other hand. Anyway, so it seems to be that he is trying to obtain her phone and is screaming at her and the father. And eventually, after some of that berating, the father does stand up and they're getting aggressive in each other's faces, at which point Tom Sandoval pushes him into the fire pit. He falls backwards. Tom runs into the house and eventually when this man rights himself and thankfully does not ignite, he runs in after Tom, and I think probably that is when he and the father ends up punching a hole that Tom then gives a photo to the police of, saying that he punched a hole through the door and pushed his head through it, smiling, looking like The Shining. I mean, you cannot make this stuff up. It sounds absolutely insane. I think it's probably a good idea for a restraining order to be filed one way or the other. It seems like the father and Victoria were living in his residence, his rented residence at the time. So they should be separated physically, whatever the circumstances may be. But I am interested to see what else develops in this story, what else may have been going on in this relationship. Just knowing what a lot of us who have been watching Vanderpump and Bravo shows for a while, what we know about Tom, I'm just really interested to hear more about this. Anyway. We'll leave that there until we get more boots on the ground with it. But I did want to talk a little bit about, we're going to stay in keeping with sketchy men, a little bit about guru grifters. This is a genre. They dropped a genre of men. They drop one every couple of generations. And there are several in this heading. And, maybe I'll have an episode about women that do a similar thing with kind of wellness and like mindfulness grifting. We could probably throw names like, I don't know, Gwyneth Paltrow in there. You could maybe throw Amanda from The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills in there, just around being like very guru, like earth mama wellness, but trying to get, personal gain out of it and perhaps maybe not seeming so zen inside. I mean, we had like the apple cider vinegar lady. So there's a precedent for it with women, but we're sticking to the men today. And this was all spurned by my husband, producer Charlie, sending me a video of Rick Rubin that I'll discuss in a little bit. And he sent it to me because he knows like I have, like for whatever reason, Rick Rubin is a bit of a like parasocial nemesis of mine. There's just something in my spideys that just has always told me that this is a grifter. And I have really good spideys with that. Like I often just have the intuition with certain people who are public, and then the evidence comes later to tell me that I was essentially right about them. And I just know it's coming down the pipe with Rick Rubin in bigger ways than it already has. If you don't know much about him, he's a music producer and a really accomplished one. He co-founded Def Jam. And so after having his own hardcore bands that did fairly well, I mean, they toured with bands like Minor Threat. So like, they were kind of doing stuff. But after that kind of split apart, he got really involved in the hip hop scene. So he produced acts such as like Run DMC, LL Cool J, the Beastie Boys. And then, he's moved on to alternative acts and metal acts. Like he's worked with the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Weezer, The Strokes. He's even worked with Black Sabbath. He was, I think a lot of younger people might know him really well for the covers album that he did with Johnny Cash before he died, which involves like this cover of Hurt by 9 Inch Nails, which, I'm not really as big of a fan of as some people are. Like I like 9 Inch Nails, I like Johnny Cash, but those two things together, it somehow fell flat for me. But we'll not get into that. This is not really going to be about music taste necessarily, so I'll kind of speed through that. Essentially, over the years, I've seen a lot of interviews with Rick Rubin. I'm interested in a lot of the bands that he's worked with. And when I do see him be interviewed, I just tend to think he sounds grifty to me. He always has. I think the way that he describes what he does and the way he kind of like shrouds it in mystery and just kind of woo-woo-ness, when it just makes me feel like, well, what are you doing, right? And then that is not helped by certain artists that he's worked with, like Slipknot. Members of Slipknot have said that they worked with him and essentially he barely showed up for those sessions. He doesn't touch a knob. He doesn't really do much. He charged them exorbitant amounts of money and essentially gave them very little feedback. And then you also had, I mentioned earlier, he worked with Black Sabbath, and Geezer from Black Sabbath has also said that, he liked some things that Rick Rubin suggested. He liked some things. He didn't like other things that he did, but he thought that, there was some bullshittiness to his approach. He had said to act like they never heard of metal before and metal didn't exist, and like be a metal band that doesn't know that metal exists. And that was kind of a contribution. He's kind of like, what? And he just kind of was like, well, what do you do? And then I've heard these interviews with him where he's like, what I'm paid for is the confidence in my taste. All right. That could be all well and good. There's a good place for curation. I just think that sometimes he readily accepts the accolades of having made stuff. Like he made these albums. He did. And like, it sounds like bands that work with him, they find his fresh eyes sometimes helpful. And sometimes conversely, they think that, they paid this guy all this money for him to sit in the corner and just be like, play metal less metal-y. But yeah, it's always kind of disturbed me though, that when people do kind of give him this, credit for like, oh, well, you basically, made the Beastie Boys albums, he'll kind of just like allow it to happen. And then, I look at producers conversely that I respect and I like their work, like a Steve Albini or like a Brian Eno. And like when they talk about working with bands, like Steve Albini is very big on saying like he just makes bands sound like themselves. Like he really tries to have as little intervention as possible. But, he can just on a technical side know how to dial something up or dialing it down. And he absolutely does know how to, move the knobs. He's not hands off in the way that Rick Rubin is. Another criticism of Rick Rubin has been that he is very about making music just sound super loud using compression. I'm not going to try to like get it. This might have been a good episode for like a producer husband, Charlie. I'm not going to try to get in the weeds with music production because I'm not a Rick Rubin. I'm no grifter. I have absolutely no background in this. But what I do have a background in is discernment. And I can always tell a snake oil salesman when I see one. And he is absolutely a snake oil salesman. And this brand of snake oil salesman, it's so hard to say, where it's just a man that you can absolutely tell has a monstrous, like elephantitis, like blown out of proportion ego, but acts like very zen and is like, I must be barefoot. And like, it reads bullshitty to me. And I think it is a very consistent retreat of extremely toxic and extremely egotistical men to act like they are spiritually enlightened and to sell you some kind of idea that they are like a mentor. And these are often people who end up trying to create cults. Like you have like a Jared Leto thing where he's like taking on that ethos and he's just like bringing hot girls into the desert into, you know, a music festival that's actually a cult. Rick Rubin kind of gives that, you know, and I've heard these stories. Like I remember hearing of this guy, I don't know if he was like a sound engineer or something, but a guy who had worked with Beck. God, I wish I remember the name of this person. But either way, this man who worked with Beck in some respect with his music was kind of at Beck's house or studio or whatever, and they were kind of listening to his newest album. I think it was Odelay at the time. So it's a huge album of Beck's, like really a lot of accolades for that album, like a lot of awards, like an amazing album. Most people who know Beck know it. But anyway, so he was working on that. And at some random point during their session or whatever it was, or their conversation, Rick Rubin just pulls up in like, I think a Rolls Royce, and is just out there. And they go out there and they're just kind of like, Rick Rubin's just pulled up to this place in a car, and he's like, do you want to come in? Like, what's going on? And he's like, no, just get in the car. So they get in the car, and somehow Rick Rubin has obtained like a demo of this album there's no release of it. Nobody knows how he obtained it. Just basically, I guess, by his contacts in music, he managed to obtain it before it was released in any way. And he just pops it in and plays the whole thing in its entirety, driving the two of them, Beck and this engineer or whatever he is, around, and then brings them back and is just like, yeah, I think you should kind of scrap this whole thing and work with me. I mean, to which thankfully Beck says no, because I mean, this is Odelay. So that would have been terrible advice. But, you know, that's just the kind of like stunt and bullshittiness and like, you know, propping up your value based on absolutely nothing, but just like smoke and mirrors and like aura that just, I don't know, there's just something about it that reads wrong to me. So this story that Charlie sent me, or I think it was an Instagram post by someone, essentially was just talking about how now Rick Rubin has a podcast. And this person, I guess, feels a similar way that I do with Rick Rubin, where we're just like suspicious of him always and just waiting for whatever the truth is to come out about him, essentially. And his guests, his first guests, since he's had a podcast, are people such as he had Woody Allen on that podcast, and we all know why that would be a weird thing to do. He has had the grifter from the WeWork grifter, so Adam Newman on it. He's had Peter Thiel. I mean, these are the kinds of guests that he wants on his podcast. You are the company you keep, essentially. And I had heard a quote from him recently saying something along the lines of like, AI is the new punk rock. What the fuck does that mean? AI is the new punk rock. What is punk rock about AI? What is like grassroots, like coming out of a community, like basically working against the system about AI? AI is the system. It's being sold to us by everyone who's in power. It is absolutely the man. So there's nothing punk rock about it whatsoever. And I think that someone who's trying to sell you a bill of goods uses like phrases like that to try to get you on board. It's absolute nonsense. And it, you know, it doesn't seem like MIA also was on his, musician MIA was also on his podcast. And we all know how problematic she's been in the recent years. But it's interesting that he seems to be cozying up to more and more tech bros like the Adam Newman and that's his name, right? Yeah. And the Peter Thiels of the world, and pushing this AI is punk rock narrative. There's a grift afoot. I can't put my finger on what the grift might be, but there's a grift afoot, and it's always on site for me with Russell, with Rick Rubin. Sorry, I got into the Russells because that's what I'm talking about next. I just have my eye on that Rick Rubin, man. I don't trust him. I don't trust his guru thing. I think it's an absolute act. I think that he is not as competent as people think he is. I think his contributions are not as significant as people think they are to music. I think a lot of these musicians were young and at an impressionable part of their career. And if some guy who, had some kind of name and had some kind of record company was essentially telling them like, play it more orange. They were just like, oh, he's onto something. And I just think that grift continues and continues. And like I said, people like Steve Albini or whatever are always kind of like, they give the credit to the artist. He is happy to take credit for things he didn't do. And, you know, you have someone like Brian Eno, who's always like, no, like I don't consider myself a real artist, even though he has amazing albums that he actually produced. Now, what albums have you ever listened to of Rick Rubin's? And don't mention things like the Beastie Boys. Those are the Beastie Boys albums. What albums of his have you listened to? Right? So I'm just like, okay, if you're a curator, if you're someone who's able to like put people in the room. I've also heard this weird thing like husband producer Charlie told me about, where he basically tells everyone to make a hit, you need to basically just make everything into Hey Mickey. You know that song, Oh Mickey, you're so pretty. Like make everything into Hey Mickey. Get the beats of Hey Mickey. That sounds so hack to me. Don't get me started. I mean, you didn't get me started. I got myself started. But Rick Rubin, it's always on site. We're going to move on to another guru grifter named Russel Simmons. So another Def Jam co-founder. What is in the water at Def Jam, right? So he co-founded Def Jam along with Rick Rubin. And he's also, you know, he had the clothing line Fat Farm, and he had Baby Fat, and there was Def Comedy Jam. I mean, it was like a whole heading of things. This guy had a real empire. He's more of a 90s guy, I guess, but it went on into the early 2000s. People might know his wife, Kimora Lee Simmons. So his thing, like this Russel Simmons, has always been very like, I'm a yogi. And he would always like show up in a, you know, cross-legged, like full lotus position, and was very like, would talk like this. And I just, again, the Spideys were just never right with this guy. And, you know, unlike Rick Rubin, that I'm just waiting for it to come to light in a bigger way, waiting for the grift to come together. It really did come out that this guy's just a serial, like, if not complete rapist, but he does have rape accusations. I mean, he had a rape accusation from a 17-year-old girl in 1991, which Brett Ratner, another character around town that comes up when anything gross is going on, was also involved in. And he has multiple allegations of sexual harassment, of rape, of sexual coercion, that are like actively being investigated and criminally looked into. He has outposted himself to Bali, Thailand, where he has some kind of wellness retreat, as one does when you're a full-blown rapist or like whatever he is allegedly. You just, I mean, he's escaping extradition, let's be real. And one of his federal charges actually did get dropped because, you know, he is a permanent resident of Bali. It seems like he just ran there to escape the law, and now he's acting like whatever guru he is there. He considers himself a Christian yogi, by the way, if you want an actual phrasing for his spirituality. Whatever he's doing isn't for me, I'll tell you that much. But yeah, I mean, some prominent women have said they have been sexually harassed by him. Women such as Kelly Catrone, a PR fashion lady, Kelly Catrone, who we all maybe knew from the city and the hills. And then we had Luanne DeLesseps, all roads lead back to Bravo, has also said that she had an incident of harassment with him. Amanda Seales, well-known actress who was on Insecure, among many other things. I mean, she's a pretty big actress in the 90s. So yeah, he's just scallywagging all over town, doing what he's doing and running off to Thailand while also calling himself a full-blown guru. And that has not been the experience of many women with him, that he's an absolute, like, enlightened, wonderful man, right? It's new grift has dropped. And we're staying on Russell's, which apparently is a name that comes up in this kind of thing, with Russell Brand. A lot of you might know Russell Brand as a comedian and just like an overall entertainer. He's been in movies and, you know, whatever. It was really telling that one of his specials was called Messiah Complex. And in that comedy special, he basically compares himself comedically for satire to figures such as Gandhi. That one might have some veracity because Gandhi had some allegations himself. Che Guevara, Malcolm X. Messiah Complex might be right. So he also, in the last few years, but I mean, a lot of these allegations date back to 2007 or 2010 or whatever, but like in the last couple of years, it's coming to light that a lot of people have considered him a sexual predator that have worked with him. A lot of women who have worked with him on movies, work with him in his comedy situations or whatever, have said that they felt like he had predatory sexual behavior. He has always maintained that he is only having consensual sex if some of it very slutty is what he likes to say. And he had, some addiction issues. I mean, along with sex addiction, he had like other drug addictions and substance addictions or whatever. And I guess in his mind, he's saying that he just had a crazy time and who knows what was going on, but it was all consensual. Although there has been the admission that some of that consensual sex, which I don't believe, I mean, even if it's the age of consent, 16, a girl was 16 when he was in his 30s, and he would call her the child. So however consensual you might think that is, I can kind of wonder how much a 30-year-old man and a 16-year-old girl can really have, a proper power dynamic relationship. But so yeah, he is, I guess he's liable for a lot of the allegations that are up against him. And I saw when I was like researching for this episode that his trial was set for last month sometime, but it seems like it has not happened yet. He's out on bail for some of these allegations. And, over the years, he's always kind of spoken about himself and painted himself as sort of very similar to Russel Simmons. The Russells like to do the same things, like be vegan and, be Buddhist, like have kind of Buddhist imagery around stuff, like he had a podcast also. They love to have a podcast. Don't we all? Where he would just kind of like be very mentory and talk about, spirituality and all of this, right? Well, since all these allegations have come out, he's interestingly turned a little bit more right-wing. He has started to consider himself just a really hardcore Christian, which is very interesting. It was very much not what he presented himself as in his early career. And I kind of wonder why this pivot comes so quickly close to him having massive allegations about him. But, it perks my ears up. It piques my interest, if you will. But yeah, we'll see where these trials go. I haven't really heard too much about it. But these trials can kind of draw on forever and we shall see. I did see he went on a Piers Morgan show. It wasn't that recent. It was like months and months ago. And Piers, I'm not a big fan of Piers Morgan, but he did kind of hold him to task and just be like, oh, you're Christian and you're really into the Bible. What's your favorite Bible verse? This guy stuttered. I mean, he had his Bible in hand. He was flipping around. He had like ample opportunities. He had as many opportunities to find a Bible verse as Harry Kane had to score, and he still came up 0-0. So it is definitely a growing irritation for me that it does seem to be when these certain men who they center their ego and all of their power, their power hungriness or whatever around mentoring and imparting wisdom and knowledge and just like putting this smoke and mirrors around themselves that like try to like draw people in a way that like, they're on to something spiritually, blah, like, and it just comes out that all you are is just a predatory, and I can't say this about Rick Rubin yet, but my God, just like Tom Sandoval, I'm like, I just know there's more to the story. Especially if your bestie is like Russel Simmons. Anyway, anytime we drop or anytime I'm able to kind of like compile and bring a file together of a new toxic kind of human that is trying to peddle itself around our society and I can give it a name, I'm happy to do that here at Peaked. And so the guru grifter is going to be that. I doubt I coined that term. I'm sure I heard someone say that. I'm sure I heard 10,000 people say that, but that's what they are. They're guru grifters and watch out for them. Adam Newman, the WeWork grifter, he very much was in that world. His wife was a humongous one of those who was very into that. And it's just, it gets people at a vulnerable place where they're really trying to like find a way to find peace and heal from things. And like they are drawn to these people that like use their power and charisma and just like influence to like get in these people's heads and, either in, I guess, Rick Rubin's case, get a bunch of money, get a bunch of power, get, their house in Italy or whatever it is, while you're just like left in the lurch, paying him to essentially tell you to, it would sound really good if it sounded like, hey, Mickey, even though you're a metal band. Stay woke, y'all. I'll leave it at that. But in this case, really, really be careful out there. And I'll see you at the next FIFA Fever extravaganza.